Hello, business students. Today, we're going to talk about consumer law. Okay. In the past, we've talked about, for example, Uniform Commercial Code, which applies to sales between two companies, for example, two merchants, to use the specific lingo of the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. Today, we're going to talk about the laws that will apply if you're selling to consumers. Again, I keep going back to the same example. If Levi's sells their product to Walmart for sale in Walmart, those two are merchants. However, when you go in the store, you are a consumer because you are buying for primarily household use. It's not a business selling to a business usually, but it's for household use. So you are a consumer. So whenever you hear this term consumer, please remember that you are an individual walking into Walmart. Yep, you qualify as a consumer. Okay. Now, so let's go over some of the various consumer laws. Again, this is applicable in the US. We've already talked about merchants as opposed to consumers. And there's the specific definition. A consumer is an individual who purchases goods or services primarily for personal, family, or household purposes. So keep that in mind when we're talking about consumer versus merchant. Why? Why do consumers receive greater protection than just two companies? Well, obviously, when you walk into Walmart, you usually have less information. You don't have an engineer on staff checking to see the specifications of what's being sold to you. Your bargaining power is far less than that of Walmart. It's not like I can go and say, yeah, I only want to pay $20 for these pants. And standard adhesion contracts, again, if you use a credit card, something like that, it's take it or leave it. You buy based on their terms. For that reason and others, and again, we're talking about U.S. law here, but there are similar laws throughout the world, protect consumers with specific consumer laws, consumer protection laws. I think that's a better term. Advertising has to be fair. We're going to talk about that. Labeling and packaging. Go buy food and notice the label that's on there that has to tell you what's in there and even the nutrition content. Sales, we'll get into that. Excuse me. Credit protections to you if you owe somebody. We'll also talk about product safety and food and drug labeling. Now, deceptive advertising. Um, if there are restrictions, both state and federal level, against a company deceptively advertising something. For example, bait and switch. I'm going to advertise A, but then I'm really going to try to sell you B when you come into my store, which is more expensive. I'm going to advertise this television for $200, but I'm only going to carry one item, one television at that price. And then when you come in, it's mysteriously gone. So I'm going to steer you to a higher priced item. So theoretically, deceptive advertising has taken place if a reasonable consumer would be misled by an advertising claim. Internet, print, radio, television, whatever. Um, if it appears to be based on factual evidence, saying studies show blah, 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 but it really isn't, that's deceptive. Half truths, for example, by celebrities that don't really use the product, that is deceptive advertising. Um, I think that there have been a couple that have gotten in trouble with FTC, Fair Trade Commission, for uh, promoting crypto, but they've never invested in, they've never received, et cetera, et cetera. So that theoretically might be considered advertising. Now, When you go buy a car, for example, you're going to hear someone's puffery, oh, this is great. You're going to feel so good in this, and da 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 da. Well, those are just obvious exaggerations, and so they're not necessarily deceptive advertising per se. All right, let's look at 3 examples. Bear with me.
Next tonight, Your Money and a consumer alert about those signs that promise a great deal. Are they always what they seem? Here's Rebecca Jarvis tonight.
These kids are ready to party in the spacious pool they see on the box cover. But instead, they're getting a lesson about a shady sales tactic, the photo fake out.
Okay, you guys ready to see this pool? Yeah! Never mind.
The pool's distributor, Manly Toys, has to pay $8.5 million after losing a deceptive packaging lawsuit in 2013 and has changed those box photos. Then there's the tiny type behind the big hype. This Sears ad promising an extra 15% off all appliances with Sears card. But as the website mouseprint.org found last year, there's fine print below that 15% off all.
Excludes general air, decor.
Sewing machines, microwaves, air conditioners.
All of these are exclusions. What can I buy?
Sears corrected what they called an inadvertent error. Then the sale fail. These signs were pushing great deals in Hobby Lobby stores.
That looks fabulous.
50% off store?
I would be willing to buy that, yes.
But the New York Attorney General said not so fast. These sales were actually offered every single day for at least a year. While not admitting guilt, Hobby Lobby paid a $220,000 settlement last June. And David, this is all a reminder to stay skeptical as a consumer.
Really eye-opening, and you've got much more tonight on the special 2020.
All right, guys, that is our first example of deceptive advertising. Let's go to another one. This is known as the good old bait and switch.
Ever wondered why that unbelievable discount on your favorite online store disappeared the moment you clicked on it? Or why the low-cost flight you were eyeing suddenly skyrocketed when you tried to book? Welcome to the world of bait and switch businesses, a tactic as old as commerce itself, but given a digital makeover in the 21st century. Consider the case of a popular electronics store. They advertise a high-end television set at a jaw-dropping price, drawing in droves of eager customers. However, upon arrival, they find the advertised product out of stock. Instead, they're directed towards other, more expensive models. This isn't mere coincidence, it's a classic example of bait and switch. The low-cost television was the bait, and the switch occurred when customers were urged to buy pricier alternatives. In another instance, a well-known online fashion retailer advertised a premium designer dress at a fraction of the original price. But when customers tried to purchase, they found the dress unavailable in their size or color. Instead, they were offered similar, higher-priced dresses. Again, the bait was the discounted dress, and the switch was the nudge towards more expensive alternatives. These tactics are not confined to tangible goods. Service industries like airlines or internet providers also employ bait and switch strategies. A low-cost flight or a high-speed internet plan is advertised, but when customers attempt to purchase, they find the deal is either unavailable or comes with a host of hidden charges and conditions. Bait and switch is not just unethical, it's illegal in many jurisdictions. Businesses that employ these tactics can face hefty fines and severe reputational damage, but the onus also lies on consumers to be aware and cautious. If a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. So what have we learned today? Bait and switch is a deceptive business tactic used to lure customers with attractive offers, only to switch them to higher-priced or less desirable alternatives. It is prevalent across industries, from electronics and fashion to airlines and internet services. While the law does its part in curbing these practices, consumers must stay vigilant. Always read the fine print, check for hidden charges, and don't hesitate to question if something doesn't feel right. Remember, the power to make informed choices lies in your hands. And that's a wrap on bait and switch businesses.
Right, bait and switch. And unfortunately, we've probably all seen that. I've been to a auto dealer in Broken Arrow where they have a great price. They advertise great price on these brand new Kias. Telluride happens to be the model I was looking at. So I go in there and say, I would like to see this. Oh, we don't have that. And well, when can you order it in? Well, we don't know if we ever can. It's usually 6, 9 months. Well, it's here in the newspaper. No, come look at this one. And they were showing me a used one that was $10,000, $15,000 higher. I didn't have the time or energy to go ahead and turn them into the state FTC, but unfortunately, this happens. It just continues to happen. All right. Now, once the Federal Trade Commission, state or federal, gets involved, they can file a formal complaint against a company that's engaged in these improper activities. Company can either settle it, like one of the videos showed, paying penalties, or there can be a hearing. They can, have them corrected on ordering processes. The FTC can say, Federal Trade Commission, FTC can say, cease and desist. You can no longer do this, or you have to do corrective advertising. So there's various hammers, if you will, that the FTC has that they can use. There's also a thing called the Lanham Act, and it also applies, this is federal, and it applies to false advertising and trademarks. And I'm going to show you some examples in a minute, but basically to recover under the Lanham Act or to make a complaint, you show that your company, let's use this example, has a trademark that's registered. Someone else is using it, or it's so similar that it would cause confusion to a normal consumer, and I've lost business. In other words, I have damages. Here's some examples. These are all examples of Adidas knockoffs. Fairly close. They might be in different words, but or if you're watching this from Europe, Adidas. Here are some examples from India, where instead of Starbucks coffee, it was, I'm sorry, my Hindi is not good, Sardar Buksh Coffee and Co. And that was found to be infringing on Starbucks. Personally, years and years ago, I went to, I think it was Tijuana. We were in San Diego and drove over the border to go to Jai Alai, if you know what that sport is. Really interesting. But I saw American tourists just buying this T-shirt that said Coma Caca because they were convinced that it says Coca-Cola in Spanish. If you speak a little Spanish, I think you know what that says. Now, let's jump over to marketing. There's also additional protections. The Telephone Consumer Protection Act. We've all had telemarketers calling us, and you thought, well, if it's against law, why in the hell is it happening? Well, because primarily they're outside the U.S., because inside the U.S. they usually get caught, have substantial penalties and or time in jail. But basically, for you, even if you're reaching into the U.S., you can't use an automatic telephone dialing system or a pre-recorded voice. Yes, you've heard them, but that's because people are probably reaching in from outside the U.S. It's illegal to transmit unsolicited advertisements unless I already have an established business relationship. So a lot of times that happens with affiliates. So if what's a good example? I buy a Toyota car or Honda. I buy a Honda car. Well, they then have the ability to send an unsolicited advertisement regarding Honda motorcycles, Honda generators, Honda lawn equipment, et cetera, because you have a relationship with Honda. There is a do not call registry. Look it up on Google, DuckDuckGo, and I'd put your number on that. Um, there's also cooling off laws that if somebody comes door to door, don't see that as much anymore, but they come door to door to sell you something, you actually have a certain period of time which you can call back or contact the seller and say, I changed my mind. More details in the text on that. Food labeling. I think we've all seen this. It has to say what the product is, the quantity, the manufacturer, and the distributor. All right, so here's an example. We've all seen this. What are the nutrition facts? Okay, this is sold this way only because it's required by law. When I was a child, back when we rode dinosaurs to school, there was no such packaging like this. FDA also, the Food and Drug Administration also protects against contaminated food, misbranded food. There are safe levels of food. I mean, sometimes you'll see FDA going in and doing inspections to make sure processing facilities are safe. Oh, excuse me. I bore myself. Consumer Product Safety Act. Again, what's a consumer? You are when you're an individual buying a product for primarily household use, et cetera, et cetera. But you may have seen the Consumer Product Safety. They'll put out publications and warnings and et cetera for things like, especially baby car seats, baby cribs, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll do research and they set safety standards. No flammable bedding for children, for example. And if they think that there's an unreasonable risk or inherent risk in the product, they will bar that hazardous product. Okay. Now, also, manufacturers have to advise if they've already sold products that they later find out to be uh, um, hazardous. Now, I think it's the NTA, National Transportation Administration, is supposed to Consumer Product Safety Act, but it's the same concept. But you see in the headlines, Toyota recalling, 100,000 cars for such and such problem. So the Consumer Product Safety Act covers that. Let's look at a video about that. And this is about a case that was on the news, as a matter of fact. Come on, Kevster, get this share going.
A recall tonight on a popular toy that was the subject of an Action News investigation last December. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has pulled Chuckle and Roar Ultimate Water Beads Activity Kit from the shelves after the death of a child. It's sold exclusively at Target. The agency says the beads pose a serious safety risk because the small absorbent gel balls can expand when ingested. One customer told our Chad Pradelli her 1-year-old daughter accidentally swallowed a bead, causing her intestine to become blocked. A local attorney had sued the manufacturer, Buffalo Games, and Target to try to get those beads pulled from store shelves. But again, they have now been recalled as of tonight.
All right. That's an interesting situation where they probably didn't even anticipate a problem. But obviously, since children started having potentially really damaging problems, Consumer Product Safety says no, no more of that. We're going to recall that product, right? So, and again, you might be subject to that. What should you do to make your product safe, et cetera, et cetera? These are all things, excuse me, that you need to be concerned about in your business. Excuse me. Next, credit protection. These are the 4 things we're going to talk about. If you apply for a loan, you buy a car, a house, et cetera, these things apply. And because you're a consumer. Number 1, Truth in Lending Act, basically, and I used to audit these actually when I was a clerk back in the day for a law firm and for banks. And essentially, these things have to be large and clearly outlined in your lease agreement. So if you have purchased or leased a car, you will have seen these categories in large print. Fair Credit Reporting Act. You've probably seen this on the news. If someone denies you a purchase because bad credit has been used against you, that should be reported to you for free, actually. Is it once a year? Anyway, for a certain time period, you can actually contact a credit agency and say, what does my credit report say? You can dispute inaccurate information, which has to be taken off or deleted. And outdated information should not be reported by credit agencies. See all these protections you have? You didn't know about it. There's also a national fraud alert system, and you can report it, and then they will demand that the credit identity theft is a good example. They can demand that the credit reporting agency stop using the identity theft information on your credit report. Also, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That basically is you have an overdue debt. There's some certain things that the collection agency, law firm, whomever is coming after you cannot do, or if they do, it's a violation. You could actually get damages from them if they do that. You're not allowed to be contacted at your place of employment. Unusual or inconvenient times, 3 a.m. That used to be a common practice. Call and wake you up all night. You got to pay this debt. Contact persons other than the debtor. Hey, your son is a no good so-and-so. He's not paying his debt. Where does he live? Harass or intimidate you, or communicate with you after you have said you refuse to pay the debt. Now they can get a judgment against you, but they should stop communications after that. All right, my friends, you did it. You made it through another session. Thank you. And I will see you next time. Thanks for your attention.